Welcome to Belair Mansion. Built around 1745 for colonial governor Samuel Ogle and his wife Anne Tasker Ogle, the mansion stood on a 23-acre tract of land and remained under ownership of the Ogle family until 1871. During the 18th century, Belair was closely tied to the importation, breeding, and racing of thoroughbred horses. After a succession of short-time owners, the house and farm were acquired by James T. Woodward in 1898. Belair continued its thoroughbred history as a stud farm owned by the Woodward family of New York until 1955. In the 20th century, the house became the focal point of William Levitt's suburban development, Belair at Bowie, in the 1960s. It subsequently served as Bowie's City Hall from 1964 until 1978. Over the next 2 decades, Belair went through an intensive building analysis and restoration before opening as a museum in 1996. Through its 275 years, Belair Mansion has played a prominent role in the history of Bowie, Prince George's County, and beyond. For most of the 18th century, no one room was generally set aside for dining. People typically dined where the sunlight was best or where the fire was laid, or during the summer in the cooler, shadier side of the house. Not until the latter half of the 18th century was a room specifically set aside for dining. The door to the right of the fireplace contains a trompe-l'oeil. Trompe-l'oeil is the technique of using realistic imagery to create an optical illusion of depth. Our trompe-l'oeil painting shows the passage which once led into a greenhouse or orangerie for raising oranges and lemons and other tender plants. The orangerie connected the main house to a 40 by 40 foot kitchen and office wing, which was added in the 1750s. The dining room walls are lined with early 19th century prints published by Josiah and John Boydell in early 19th century England. They depict scenes from the plays of William Shakespeare, a very fashionable decorative item of the day. The exhibit case contains Ogle family silver from the 18th and 19th centuries. The tea set was made by Baltimore's Kirk silversmiths. The table is set for dinner, with dishes, as custom required, arranged symmetrically. The tiered table at the end of the dining table, called a dumbwaiter, enables a host or hostess to serve with less assistance from servants. And the mahogany sideboard on the south wall, dated circa 1790 to 1800, was made in Maryland or Northern Virginia. Sideboard served a utilitarian purpose, holding assorted linens, tableware, and sometimes bottles of wine and other spirits. This area served as the reception hall and was the fanciest space in the house. Visitors to Belair would enter through the garden door and then be seated here before being escorted to another part of the house. The 4 paintings by Philip Mercer represent the seasons and offer a look at the changing face of the year through the changing faces of people, from young to elderly. Family tradition holds that they were given to Samuel Ogle by the 5th Lord Baltimore. Painted in the 1740s, they hung in the hall for over 120 years and left Belair with its sale by the Ogles in 1871. After an absence of 126 years, they were returned to their original home through the fundraising activities of the Friends of Belair Estate. Floor cloths were, and continue to be, fabricated by painting a large piece of canvas with many layers of paint, often replicating marble. They are today, as they were long ago, extremely durable. The 2 mid-18th century English red walnut chairs flanking a tilt-top tea table, plus the reproduction leather chairs against the walls, gives a gentle nod to the fact that rooms were meant to be multifunctional and furnishings were to be moved and adjusted according to the current need. This large room was originally 2 rooms with a dividing wall in the center. At the north end, the room's probable use was that of a bedchamber, overlooking the service side of the house. The south end is what was likely a small parlor. When the Woodward family acquired the house in 1898, they made a number of changes, including the removal of that wall to open up the 2 rooms. During the City Hall period, this room housed the City Council chambers. Over the fireplaces hang reproduction portraits of Governor Samuel Ogle and Ann Tasker Ogle. The originals, which once hung at Belair, were painted in London about 1746, probably by Thomas Hudson, an important English portrait painter. The originals remain in the family at the still surviving home of their granddaughter in Mount Airy, Virginia. At the time of their marriage, Ann Tasker was 17 and Samuel Ogle was 47. The marriage created a union of rich and powerful Maryland gentry. Upon Samuel Ogle's death in 1752, rather than leaving his wife a bequest as stipulated in a prenuptial agreement, he willed a pension for her every year for the rest of her life. Anne traveled widely and lived in Europe with grandchildren for a number of years, dying at the age of 94, having never remarried. We leave the 18th century briefly and move into the early 20th century sunroom. James T. Woodward, the first Woodward owner of Belair in 1898, added a connecting hyphen and wing prior to 1910. That hyphen and wing were enlarged by his nephew William Woodward Sr. between 1912 and 1914. Period photographs indicate the room was filled with wicker furniture and contained 65 fox masks mounted on the wall. The fox mask over the fireplace is one of Mr. Woodward's. The facade that faces today's Tulip Grove Drive was the functional part of the house, facing towards outbuildings such as kitchens, smokehouse, laundry, and dairy. The exterior features are plainer as compared to those on the garden side of the home. The interior of this passage gives the best idea of what the interiors looked like prior to the first renovation of 1810 to 1815, with very plain window openings and the paneled plaster walls. Photographs taken during the restoration of the mansion indicate that the Woodwards rebuilt the staircase going in the opposite direction. In the original construction, the stair ascended directly in front of the window, a common feature in many houses built during the first half of the 18th century to take advantage of the light coming in through the window. This small room may have served as an office, a housekeeper's room, or butler's pantry, as was common in houses in the 18th century. It is a small, plain room, far more useful in cold weather than larger ceremonial rooms since it was much easier to heat. The Philadelphia walnut desk, circa 1770, represents the desk listed in the 1763 inventory of Benjamin Tasker. Benjamin was Ann Tasker Ogle's brother and helped her run the estate after Samuel Ogle's death. Objects on the desk include documents, copies of the Gentleman's Magazine, the 18th century equivalent of Newsweek, pipes, tobacco, and a set of scales. The mahogany card table reflects the 18th century leisure activities of card playing and games of chance. The side chairs are English circa 1780, and an 18th century liquor case and bottles sit nearby. All items indicating a male presence here. 12 William Hogarth prints lining the wall depict industry and idleness. Prints of this nature were, in the 18th century, inexpensive and available to all classes. The series is intended to teach a moral lesson about the benefits of hard work and clean living. The Woodwards installed the dumbwaiter between the first floor and cellar to facilitate moving food from kitchen to a butler's pantry, which was just outside the dining room. Above the dumbwaiter, note the annunciator box, a call bell system used to summon the servants from different parts of the house. The Annunciator box contained a series of bells rung from rooms above to alert staff that service was required. The mansion's first kitchen was located in the cellar. The hearth stood where the Woodward's early 20th century stove stands today. Upon his return from England, Samuel Ogle built a freestanding 40 by 40 foot structure which was a kitchen and office. This structure functioned for many years. During the Woodward period, the kitchen was returned to the cellar area. Today, the cellar replicates the 1930s Woodward kitchen. Cabinets from the early 20th century butler's pantry, a 1930s GE monitored top refrigerator, and kitchen objects and utensils from the 20s and 30s. The large round oak table is reputed to have come from Belair. Its simple style may reflect its possible use in a servant's area, such as a kitchen. The wooden box with two receptacles to the right of the stove is a fireless cooker, an early version of the crock pot. Fireless cookers date to Roman times and were used by settlers in this country as they made their way west on wagon trains. Soapstone discs are heated, food inserted, the lid closed. Upon the cook's return several hours later, contents in the cooker were done and ready to be consumed. The wine cellar was used as a cool space for storing wines, stored vegetables, meats, tallow candles, and other items as well. During the house's history, the wine cellar was eventually filled in and only rediscovered by the archaeologists during the restoration of the home. The small room across from the wine cellar may have been a living or work area for some of the enslaved people at Belair. No written evidence has been discovered to date regarding their actual living spaces, but the doorway on the front wall provides an egress to a passage under the front steps, which allows easy access to the workspaces in the house without having to come through the front door. There is no clue as to their occupations, only to their value, as listed in the probate inventories. While the exact number of enslaved people owned by the Ogles is unknown, some were sold at estate sales for large sums, indicating that they possessed specialized skills. Today, the room houses an exhibit about the history of slavery at Belair and in colonial America. The 18th century tavern table reflects the use of the space as a probable living area for enslaved people who once worked in the home. The remainder of objects in the space, a spinning wheel, a bedroll, candle bowls, are typical of the objects that may have occupied this space. The very plain cupboard to the left of the door is doubly significant. Not only is it an Ogle piece, but family history indicates it was made in the early 19th century by an enslaved craftsman. This is particularly valuable because so few of these examples exist today. The large brick arches throughout the cellar bear the weight of the brick mass of the house. As in all houses of the period, all interior walls were load-bearing and are brick. There are a number of points of interest contained within Belair's 5 acres. Proceed to the front of the mansion where the teardrop drive is located. Looking north, please note the allée or tunnel of tulip poplar trees. Many of these trees were planted in the 1750s and 1760s. They extend for a full mile down to Maryland Route 450, formerly known as Annapolis Road, where the original entrance gate to the estate once stood. This area was, in the 18th century, the backyard of the house. Archaeology has revealed the foundations of structures and a great number of bits and pieces from Belair's material history. Just north of the sunroom, you will see a marker planted by the city of Bowie in memory of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Walking around to the south side of the house, you will note the gardens, terraces, and ramps remain in their original 18th century configuration. In 18th century terraced gardens such as Belair's, no steps existed to take the walkers to the lower terraces of the garden. Instead, To either side of the garden, and sometimes in the middle, soil was packed into sloping ramps for ease of access to different garden terraces. From the first terrace, turn and look back at the facade of the mansion. The terracing sets the structure on an even higher hill, commanding the view, no doubt, for quite a distance in the 18th century. Bricks on the garden facade have glazed headers, the short ends. Firing these bricks closer to the fire in a brick kiln caused salts to create a glassy finish on the end of the brick. These glazed headers most certainly sparkle in southern exposure on this side of the house.